computer.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome back to another TRE in depth, where we get to pick Cheda's brain on conversations all around TRE. Today we're going to be looking at primitive reflexes and brain development. And yeah, this is going to be a nice hour where we'll ask Cheda some questions. So we'll just go through, get an introduction from him to this topic, and then we will have time for any of you to have questions also at the end if you want to ask anything. And we will try and relate this back to TRE as well, because it's a really important topic. So just to introduce myself, I'm Chandani Amin. I'm a Reiki reflexologist and TRE provider in London. And I've been working with Cheda for the last couple of years. And this kind of came about as a way who are working with the body and want to learn more about involuntary movement and the just kind of wider depth of TRE as a practice. And Cheda, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chandani. Hi, I'm Cheda. Yes, I love this work. I love exploration and human body. It's extraordinary and has endless source of inspiration for me. So primitive reflexes is something I've been diving deeper into for a number of years now, and I've been teaching some workshops on this, and it is ongoing inquiry because I'll try to present some of my observations and my clinical experience and the work of some other experts in the field, and I think that's going to be up and coming field that's going to be incredibly beneficial for all therapists, really, body oriented or not, so you really I believe we should, or we need to know more about this. You don't necessarily need to be an expert. By understanding certain patterns and certain responses, it can help your clients so much. So yeah, hence this talk. So and by the way, it is a conversation, so I'm not going to be bombarding you with information. We let's have a discussion here, and you might agree with certain things, or you might not, or you might have some other insights. Please share. All is welcome. It is a conversation. Just to confirm that.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, why don't we start with just introducing what are primitive reflexes?
Okay, so for some of you that you might not know, and some of us there are different descriptions and translations and formulations of the term primitive reflexes, but in essence, these are the basic movement patterns that resonate in response to particular stimuli. So very basic involuntary movement patterns in response to a stimuli, specific stimuli, I would add. So that could be one of the descriptions that I like. It's inclusive, it's neutral, and useful. Yes.
Okay.
And what I talked about before.
Okay, do you want to explain a little bit more about why or how primitive reflexes kind of relate to the brain development in children?
So yeah, I'm just asking Chandani, is this okay? Because sometimes some of my explanations can be a little bit more complex, and the whole idea is of my own work to simplify things, and which is not always easy. And my desire is to kind of translate some of the maybe more higher scientific or brain work or body anatomical expressions into practical, palatable, and usable language and application. So, and sometimes I'm good at that, and other times I'm not. So please tell me if some of my explanations, you understand, and don't feel that you're not good enough if you don't understand certain things. I'm still learning myself after years and decades of learning. So it's a huge subject, and I'm going to try to weave different avenues here to help you kind of understand the importance of this. So let me maybe back up and say why I want to teach this and why am I teaching this and studying this and working with this. And simply because I came across primitive reflex, many years ago, and also studying, we were taught primitive reflexes mature within 12 months of age. And you ask any pediatrician, any medic, that's basically in textbooks. However, through my own exploration with TRE and involuntary movements specifically, I was coming up with these movements within my own body that they were reminding me of these early patterns, early reflexes, and that also included particular emotional states, particular gestures, very early gestures that newborns form and express, and so on. And then, just to cut the long story short, I think it was 2019, I came across work of Robert Melillo, and he's an expert in this field. And he claims that over 50% of all adults, or at least 50% of all adults, have retained reflexes. And I was like, hold on, this is something that really rings true to me. So as I looked deeper into this and I learned some of his work and work from other people, I realized that, as a matter of fact, I definitely have retained primitive reflexes. As a matter of fact, thousands of my clients also have retained primitive reflexes. And that really explained this missing link and lack of understanding that I could not connect certain expression and with certain movements. And that's how the journey started. And and then understanding that this close relationship between these primitive involuntary movements and the primitive reflexes and brain development, and then later on cognitive development, sensory development, attachments, and all of that. It's a huge field. And yeah,
that's a huge number, like 50% of people, because that's not what most, I don't know, that's not what the mainstream kind of medical system is saying at all. Because what I've read is, or one of the things I've read is that, we're supposed to mature all these reflexes by the end of our first year. So what's happening that's not the case?
So what's happening is that they're not studying after 12 months the subjects. That's what's happening, And some of us in clinical practice, we're saying that actually expression of particular movements is very similar and related to this. So most of us, will mature to some extent these primitive reflexes into more complex movements. Then you go into the postural reflexes, because we move into upright position, and then you need to, that relationship, they're called righteous move, the responses as well, and postural reflexes then come into play, and different parts of the brain then start to, premotor and motor cortex start to be, and the basal ganglia start to be more online and more regulating these movements. But until then, in case, often what can happen, we have these primitive reflexes that start in utero, Okay, so you got fear paralysis reflex that starts in utero. Then you got Morode, you got asymmetric tonic reflex, symmetric tonic reflex, grasp, palma. I mean, you got 72 reflexes, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
We're talking mainly about 10 most dominant ones that's help development of the brain and so on. If particular shock, injury, trauma, or something happens during these 12 months, it's only plausible and actually common sense that that moment might affect of trauma or dysfunction might affect formation not only of primitive reflexes but of child's development. And I think all of us in our history from birth or pre-birth even, then birth and post-birth period, we went through the challenges, regardless how well our parents did or not. I mean, we went through some challenges, and it is very common that we were left for too long on our own, without adequate nourishment or connection with the carer, not because they're bad or you just simply, my needs could not be met in that particular moment. And what I see, this actually carries on in life. I know personally some of my needs cannot be met even right now. And I can look back and I can know, due to my own research and experience and inner work that transformed my life and experience right now, it's very clear that certain things happened at that time, and for so many of my clients. So if we assume that we did have some challenges, in our early development, then we can actually be more inclusive and more neutral and more relaxing about it, and try to do something about it rather than negate and say no, science says this, but science said many things, but then they change their mind, and that's the point of science. That's how us ordinary people who are working with the real life situations often bring to the awareness that some of these things might need to be researched deeper. Anyway, in trauma world, no one is talking about this. They talk a little bit about early developmental trauma and so on, but actually adult trauma are significantly affected by some of these early developmental things, including primitive reflexes. And there is a neurological connection there in the brainstem that regulates some of these things. And so, let me just pause here rather than go on rampage as I can when I get excited about this stuff. So
is there, I mean, because just to say for everyone, I'm also learning a lot of this stuff for the first time as well, so I'm very curious about this. And is there an example, like a simple example of one of these reflexes that you could just talk us through what it looks like as a movement, and then what would happen when it matures?
Okay, so I'm going to show you actually the example because I thought maybe it would be useful to show you the real life example of that. Let's see, and actually I got this from Melilo's Instagram page because he sent this over. And
okay, perfect.
Hold on, how do I share screen? I do this, and then this happens. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why you shouldn't scare your wife.
Say it again.
I'm just reading the thing.
So here we go. Watch this.
You shouldn't scare your wife. This is why you should.
Okay. It's a funny one, but it's beautifully actually, and if you can read this on top, Moreau reflex, her hands fly up and back and open, then they come back and activate her fight and flight sympathetic nervous system, and she lashes out.
Oh, wow.
And primitive reflex is in at least 50% of adults. Okay, and I will replay this again so you actually can see. You probably now the whole point of teaching this work is that we see this all the time, but unless you know what are you looking at, you're not going to see. The reality is depends on your awareness and your consciousness. So the more we learn, our awareness and consciousness grows, and then you can see things that are not as visible. So just watch, she's relaxed, and then he's gonna perform that scare, and you will see how her reflexes come up, how her hands go up. And that's exactly what infant does from 0 to 6, from when it's born to 6 months of age, and it's called Moreau reflex. And there is also starter reflex, which is a kind of a form of Moreau, someone calls it starter. And it is about sympathetic, it is about fight and flight, it is about survival, it is about also orientation. And this is really important when I teach orientation as a concept. It's used in trauma world extensively for good reason, but often orientation is used as a more, as Porges would say, for safety, lack of safety, and so on. However, I learned through primitive reflexes that orientation is also part of the curiosity. And that's such a big subject. And that sense of curiosity, if some of these reflexes and correct development was provided, it means that our attachment and curiosity with others, with reality, will be different as well. Okay, let me just not go there too quickly. Let me just show you one more time the Moreau reflex in an adult.
This is
Okay. So stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Because it should. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's already stopped by itself.
Yeah, I did it for you.
Thank you. Thanks for your help. That's what I need. Okay. So interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can see this in daily life, and you would assume, but it was such a strong reaction. Yeah, some people will have different response. They might not be freaking out. They would. I think most people will kind of connect that he got electric shock. There would be a response, but such a huge response clearly indicates, the particular movements. And then you can also assume in her daily life that potentially they can be exaggerated, could be hypersensitivity, exaggerated response, potentially complex emotional regulation as well. Could be a number of things happening there. So, yeah. So that's the example I kind of prepared for you to see. And the question is, what triggered the woman? So her husband was fixing the light, and he faked that he got the electric shock. So he went, and she freaked out totally. So that was the response. But and then he started to laugh, and then she realized she went through this shock, fight, flight, into kind of a defense attack. It was such a beautiful observation of the defense strategies, how they manifested within 3 seconds there. So how our nervous system responded.
As soon as he started laughing, then her fight or flight switched on. So she realized that the danger, yeah, I guess she realized that she was still in that mode. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So, because when that's come up in a TRE session, is this movement pattern that is actually, it's come up a few times with clients. So it's this expression of this movement trying to complete. Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I started actually to experience this in my body, and that diaphragmatic movement is very strongly connected with that, because that's where the babies are starting to develop some of this anterior plane and the musculature, and then to orient and rotate towards, and to have some stability, and core structures are being formed, and is part of this formation. So often you will see in TRE more than 60-70% of all clients will have at some point some of these responses. And it could be due to shock and trauma that we lived through, survived, but also could be this early more raw reflexes trying to mature. So it's showing up. And often, that was kind of also starting point for me. But there are a number of others, that your face movements in your face, that the hand movements, you need to observe that, rotation of the neck, all of these are all deeply connected with some of the primitive reflexes.
And so these reflexes that have been retained,
yes,
even as an adult, so I don't know how old that would, but we can still guide them or explore them, I don't know, towards maturation or completion, even in adulthood.
Exactly. Okay, so there are a couple of things here. What I've noticed in my own clinical practice, I noticed working with thousands of people that after TRE, people mainly, they feel better, they feel relaxed, they feel different, they feel more coherent. And what I notice, and my assumption is, that TRE is so powerful for primitive reflexes. And for people who have really good experience with TRE, I'm almost certain that they have retained primitive reflexes. And I'm kind of the main subject. But I've seen for most people that's the case. So the good TRE benefits or strong benefits often will indicate that there are retained primitive reflexes. And if you look, I mean, there are videos on in utero, and you'll see that the base of all movements is this vibration and this really early involuntary movement from the embryo into fetus and so on. This is how organs are formed. And some of these involuntary movements actually help the formation of organ structures and nervous system, the brain as well. And to me, that is fascinating. And you can see how after TRE session or some good somatic work, especially if you've been touched as well, for some of us who had some of the galant and amphibian reflex retained, you will see deeper relaxation of the whole system. You will go deeper into the parasympathetic state, but not just deep into the parasympathetic state, but you will be more coherent as well in your movements, in your clarity of your thoughts, your emotional regulation. And and for me, these are really essential elements there, because then you realize that when you work with these early movements, you are affecting a number of systems there. So you are affecting visual system, you are affecting auditory system, your eyesight might be clearer, your hearing, your proprioceptive system, your interoceptive system, your tactile system, olfactory, all systems and these streams that regulate our brain and are regulated within our brain and the body. There is improvement. And to me, there was like, wow, this really is profoundly important. And then I learned from Melillo that actually brain grows like a seed. So it grows from the brain stem and then opens into 360 degrees. And involuntary movements are regulated with this pyramidal tract within the brain stem. that also regulates some of the neurogenic tremors and other involuntary movement. So to me, that connection between those very early involuntary movement and what we do, as a matter of fact, even positioning, like lotus position, it's all in all cultures across the world, lotus position. As a matter of fact, that's one of the ways of integrating fear paralysis reflex. So that's what you do, basically. So what we do, we raise our hips, we have the tremor, and you are engaging and you're priming that fear paralysis reflex. And if you learn more about fear paralysis reflex, you realize that fear paralysis reflex or the retained fear paralysis reflex can cause low tolerance to stress, anxiety, hypersensitivity, fatigue, number of things. You know, also with the fear paralysis and the Moreau retention, because fear paralysis reflex then matures into Moreau reflex. So okay. And then deeper sense of freeze. Then often some people go into freeze. That is related with the fear paralysis reflex. But with the Moreau as well, then there are studies on subjects that there's higher cortisol, higher blood sugar level, lower digestive enzymes, lower pH balance. So there are hyperactive immune system. You know, all of these functionality of our neuroimmunoendocrine system are all connected and often can be related to those early patterns. Take a deep breath now.
So what I'm hearing is that all these reflexes are these initial involuntary movements that are they're there for survival, right? For the baby's innate intelligence to keep it alive, right? And they're supposed to mature into these larger movements, these motor functions, plus obviously many other things. And so is that one of the ways that we can, I mean, I'm sure there's many ways, but is that one of the ways that we can see? So because from a trauma perspective, you know, people are clumsy if they don't have much kind of spatial awareness, these kind of things. Is that another sign?
Exactly. So that's proprioceptive awareness. So if you were dropped at 3 months of age, and I think endless babies were dropped, you know, in one way or the other, for example, that can affect your vestibular system, your hippocampus, and your orientation, and so on. And in that particular time, until that healed, that can have a little effect on formation of some of these structures and the proprioceptive awareness. Yes, just I'm thinking how to bring that more to so for example, from the brainstem, as the brainstem develops, and then you got the midbrain and limbic system, how it grows together. If the original kind of structures are functional, you know, they are developed properly and functional, it's most likely your higher functions will be also better and more coherent and more mature. So your limbic system, for example, then emotional regulation would also be better, your cognitive function, your motor function, because also first part of your neocortex, human brain, that's it's one of the first parts that develops, it's the sensory parts of in the parietal lobe. And that's directly related to some of these involuntary movements. So what we are understanding that your proprioception, interoception, you know, is feeding that development of the brain. The movement, this involuntary movement within the baby is feeding and helping developing these brains. Baby doesn't necessarily care for philosophical discourses, mathematical formulations, and things like that. It's actually cares for connection with the carer and the movement. Babies like to move and sleep and eat. That's kind of the main thing. That sucking reflex and snout reflex is hugely important. The reflexes, asymmetrical tonic reflex, that and grasp reflex, all of that really primes the orientation, the attachment, the sense of connection with others, nourishment, and then if baby is connected well, nurtured well, then the formation, emotional formation also, limbic system is forming well. So to me, it is really becoming more and more like this domino effect, but it's not linear, obviously. It's a quantum field, our systems are. But understanding that and knowing that and seeing in the client how, dominant side of the face or of the body and how it's expressing in life in a therapy session, you can really help a lot with that by connecting and stimulating different parts of the body, and that will stimulate the brain and help mature some of these incomplete structures. And Babinski reflex, for example, that's kind of should be the last reflex, and it's a foot reflex. If you stroke the foot upwards from the heel up, should be deflection of the toes, and then you have also extension and a number of responses. But that is priming the plantar fascia and all 200,000 nerve endings in the foot to actually bring information towards the brain stem, towards the hippocampus, insula, and so on, and it's feeding some of these larger structures in the brain. And if there is immature development, you can see that babies or toddlers have difficulties in balancing. They might have a flat foot. All babies have flat feet, but they might retain the flat feet, and there would be imbalance and in movement, the gait. You can observe that, and later on in life, some people will struggle with serious problems with their feet. And that could be potentially related to those very early patterns. I hope that makes sense. I'm very excited about this. It's somehow semi-new territory that that we are going through, but it's not that new. But we got more knowledge and how to. And in some of the body work, that's how you are going to. Complete and these reflexes and other movements and improve them. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe it's a good time to see if anyone has any questions. I'm personally think so. What my understanding is that these primitive reflexes are literally intertwined with the brain development and the how our brain receives information from the world around us through grasping, sucking, being moved, having stimulation and connection from caregivers, and that we can still improve this as adults, and in turn keep developing our brains. And it's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. And that's why I like this work, because you can change it. Neuroplasticity is ongoing. The network formation in the brain, it is ongoing. So if you feed the brain and the body correctly with adequate stimuli, you will get better responses for sure. It's better.
Yes, thanks. Could it pertain the same subject, the body shivering, more than tremoring, the whole body without any trigger, all of a sudden and for a long time? I didn't know how to, well, the verb is not the appropriate verb is not to react. I didn't know how to interpret it. It was a release of, or was it something different? I don't know.
Yeah, I would need more context on that, but there could be more of a, it sounds more like a release, not necessarily primitive reflex integration.
And the legs were jerking, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not.
The lady went for a massage. I was there, and I could see the whole scene. And of course, I didn't do any intervention. I kept silent, and the therapist as well. And then he left her on her own while I thought it was not that safe. But anyway, I just told her, I'm here, and that's it. And it went on for a long time.
Usually must have been a trigger of some kind. So it might not be perceptual, but something interoceptively could have been a particular. Often what you're describing, it does happen actually, you know, maybe not as intense as that, but frequently where the client is given space that hasn't been given before. And so there is a chance for body unconsciously, neuroceptively thinks, oh, now I can let go of all the tension now. And then woof, that kind of happens. That would be my interpretation.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Louise.
Hi, Cheda. Yeah, so from what I'm trying to understand, is it possible that those primitive reflexes have been completed as a child and then later on in life through trauma, through chronic stresses and being held in a sympathetic state for too long, that those primitive reflexes then return and there's a deteriorative state of the nervous system? Because that's been my experience, is that maybe that person's experience, even in my own experience, there was a period of being fine, of feeling comfortable, and then this long-term anxiety, depression, being held in sympathetic or even in freeze, and then suddenly brain networks are going haywire, and there's myoclonic jerks, and there's this neurological fallout, is what it would be termed, as a neurologist who maybe doesn't understand what is happening in the body and how deeply the body is trying to discharge that upregulated energy. Would that make sense? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, there's a debate in our small circles with neuro nerds there on that. So the debate is, some people claim that once the primitive reflexes are completed, they cannot be then later on reawakened. And that the neurological kind of proof of that. My own sense is, because you can see this in dementia, in Alzheimer's, in some of the injuries, as you rightly pointed out, you know, trauma and shock, we see these things return. As a matter of fact, my own personal belief on that, not just belief, but yeah, belief and experience, that no experience ever leaves us. Everything we experience from our moment of conception onwards, it's registered somewhere in our brain and body and so on. And then depends, you know, we might not have conscious awareness because we don't have a conscious awareness of 9 to 10 billion reactions that take every second in each cell of our body. We have no slightest clue what's going on. Equally, we wouldn't have understanding about some of these pathways and experiences, how they're stored, processed, and and utilized. And I think it's very plausible what you said there. That could be the formation and maturation, but then due to injury, we see this in injury, car accidents or injuries, that people actually fall back to that very early reflex, because you don't need to use basal ganglia, you don't need to use motor cortex. Involuntary movement is simpler and easier for body to utilize. So yeah, I would, assume that to be true as well. So hence even greater respect for the work we do as well. So there's more space there.
I think so. Just to elaborate, I don't want to take up too much time. But even without a physical injury, I think what I'm seeing and I haven't been a TRE provider for a long time, but I'm already noticing often, and I do live in South Africa, and I think every person in South Africa lives in a constant state of trauma in some sense. There's just always stress. And I'm seeing more and more is this almost poisoning of this pumping adrenaline for just an ongoing period of time, that in itself, without a physical injury, is actually causing damage to the nervous system. On a cellular level, it seems to be creating a lot of dysfunction that you're seeing people presenting with, even seizures, even having speech malfunctions, and these very significant neurological fallouts that are not related to a big injury, but very clearly an indicator about how damaging stress is to the body. And then how do we then use TRE to go about reteaching the body to ease itself out of that state, and to maybe ease that homeostasis that's maybe shifted back into parasympathetic functioning. And it takes a very long time, but I feel that's, and is that possible to bring it all the way back down, and then for that healing to happen, so that damage that's been caused can be undone?
Yeah, I think also, we need to change the lifestyle as well. So it is very difficult if you're under siege continuously. Yeah, you might have some relief, but if you go back into toxic relationship, toxic work, toxic environment, you will the neuroception, the awareness without our conscious awareness actually will be firing. And so alongside of that, there are 6 layers of cortical neuronal functionality, and sometimes they don't work in the linear formation. Some of these streams are connecting with different parts of the brain, different networks, to create our reality as well. So I think this is big part of work. That's what we are doing here. Melillo talks about the vertical and horizontal regulation. And the problem with the vertical regulation, most of you are familiar with the triune brain, that the brain develops bottom up, but it's regulated top down. And we can affect the brain from the body, but the brain ultimately will regulate these movements. The problem is cognitive therapy and other therapies that work top down. If primitive reflexes and these movements and early trauma is still present in the body, they cannot penetrate all the way. This is the really missing link here, which I'm really trying to understand deeper and explore and teach. That's because if the trauma so early happens and it stays also in the system at some level, invisibly as well, it might be fully functional as well. However, some of the lack of maturation will affect the top-down regulation and actually our, the perception of life. So,
okay, thank you so much. That's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Since you spoke about the babies and the reflexes and everything, the question is, I have a nephew when he was about 2, and because he lost his grandmother, which is my mom, and we brought him to the hospital. He didn't know what was going on because he was just awakened from his sleep, but his body just reacted, and he was just like tremoring in a manner that we have never seen it before. So is it the body that sends something that's not right, or is that some form of reflexes that you talk about? Because he was just like 2 years old, and no information was given to him, but he was just awakened from his sleep and brought to the hospital. And when he arrived there, he was just tremoring, and I had to carry him to calm him. And I told him that grandma is in the room. He didn't see it then when he was tremoring. I had to calm him down, and he said that he wants to go inside, and he stopped tremoring when he saw his grandmother. Yeah, so it's a very natural reflexes, I guess, that his body felt it.
Yeah, I think probably that was a response to a different environment, and on some level he could pick up from you, his mom or whoever, some sense of tension that something is not regular. So and I don't know how his experience during the birth was. Maybe he was born in a hospital, and maybe he had some challenges during the birth as well. There might be a memory. There definitely is a memory. Newborns have a memory of particular traumas in a hospital. So it could be a combination of things that trigger that response. And yeah, you've done great with regulating him, holding him. That's what we need. But we do underestimate the power and awareness of because we cannot explain it. But yeah, babies have different perceptual field. Their right brain it's a lot more developed than the left brain, and maybe they cannot understand cognitively, but on a different level they are perceiving a lot. And there was a great a British psychologist. He used hypnosis, and he talks about some of his patients decades later were passing by the hospital and having violent voluntary movements, shakes. They could not contain themselves. They had vomiting. They had, extraordinary responses, and they had no idea why. And then in hypnosis, they were taken back, and they had extreme trauma and post-birth surgeries and things like that. So just that reminds me, that was decades ago I read some of his work. So yeah, it is the response there. That might not necessarily related to primitive reflexes. It's just the neurological and the whole body response.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe what's useful to add to this as well, that's for some of you, because I will be teaching the workshop in July, 13th and 14th of July in London, and it will be online as well. And we will be exploring this a lot more in depth. Clearly, this is just a little taster and a little conversation about it, because I do believe it's such a valuable and important work. But I will be teaching, 7 to 8, maybe 10 reflexes that you can recognize, and how they manifest, and how to actually work with them within TRE and not, because some of these reflexes can be integrated during TRE as well. And I practice that, and I develop some of the interventions for that. But also there are, simple movements that can be applied, especially if you recognize the client has the primitive reflexes retained. They can go back home and do few movements that can be incredibly beneficial for them long term, because these movements need to be repeated more frequently in order for the brain to complete them. And the other thing which is really important, particularly with this attachment and attunement, that is part of the primitive reflexes, helps the orientation, apart from survival, but helps this orientation as well. And as I mentioned slightly before, the orientation is not always towards safety. It's also towards curiosity, towards adventure, towards, and if we have curiosity and adventure in our life in TRE, that really breeds the health, and that's how it's supported, often indicates the deeper and greater functionality of the system. But if people are in a hypervigilant state, in a fear paralysis state, in really constant anxiety, that clearly orientation and it's limited, and clearly the attachments and attunement and bonding with others, including oneself, it's limited. And this is so important to help these people. Some of us have struggled with attachment and bonding as children and in relationships. And the more we went through this work, our attachment with ourselves, first of all, and others improved tremendously, and that sense of bonding and connection and interdependency, not codependency, really improved. So I really would strongly, that to me, it's not many neurologists talk about this, but my own experience as a trauma therapist, it was such a strong part of the social engagement, attachment, attunement, and bonding. It's so important. And you can see how people lack that, and that often is related, believe it or not, to primitive reflexes. And that's a really big part that I want to bring to your awareness as well.
We need to improve on that statistic, so that it's not 50% of us walking around with immature reflexes.
Yeah, exactly.
Simona, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I was struggling with this computer. Hi, everyone. Yes, I actually had a question, because it's quite interesting what you said, Cheda, now. And from a very personal experience myself, which, long story short, I've been in complex post-traumatic stress disorder all my life. And I've been really struggling, and I was in a freeze state, and it was like a very dysregulated system, from having autoimmune diseases to really bad PMS to many things that I just overcome in the last few years. But in the same time, I was on the extreme side with curiosity and orientation, and I just wanted to explore life, and I was like in this extremes. I had to leave places and just run away, to the point in which I was just like on survival mode all the time, and I was creating this pattern to myself. But both these states, the extreme states, brought me to a really balanced one now, which I can understand exactly where I was coming from. I've been studying a lot, all these brain connections, and reading about complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, all these things. And it's quite curious, how does this work in such an extreme case?
In my opinion, it's due to our early patterning and imprinting, because what you're describing there, the part of you was dysregulated, but there was this part of curiosity and orientation towards adventure. And this can be led by fear, or I want to know more. And, often some of us will have a starting point as not good enough, so I need to develop more, I need to be loved more. The more I know, I'm going to be better, stronger, smarter, all of these things. But also there is other part of that, which is just genuine human curiosity. that indicates to me that there was some support, despite the stress, trauma, and difficulties. We did have some support that actually encouraged that within us, because it is unlikely, if there was none of that, that curiosity will be present in that more adventurous form. So that would be my kind of observation on that. But yeah. And often the more we work with trauma, and what I found, a lot of people really focus only on traumatic events. And, you know, that's kind of, we were taught that initially when you work with trauma, and definitely you need to address that. But my work of late is, last few years, I'm actually focusing more on what's good within you. Where are your resources? How well, what do you like? What's you know, what stimulates you? What excites you? Because if you really focus on trauma alone, you know, your life really becomes limited and traumatic. And it's, you know, however, if you open the perception of your interior landscape, of your, you know, resources, of beauty of life, and respect the difficulties and challenges at the same time, because we have both of these and more within us simultaneously, I found this recovery, healing, transformation, and evolution, it gets much faster and much greater.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you for your answer. It does make sense. In my specific case, I don't remember much good about anything. I don't remember my childhood, let's put it that way, except those really big triggers that brought me to where I was in this PTSD. But I was always thinking that by being so curious, I'm trying to create new memories in order to escape those ones. And I had to go to the extreme side in order to overcome those ones, to balance them out, to get them to a level. But saying that I must have had some support maybe does make sense, but consciously there's no memory of it.
Sure, but just for you and for all of you, that yeah, we all fall into this trap. We want new memories to erase the old ones. You can't, just to tell you.
I know.
To really, have peace with the past is happened, you know. There is, and also there is no need to change it, no matter how bad certain things were. Which means we were so powerful at that time, we survived it already. That's what Baselli's teaching was one of the greatest pieces he ever taught me, that no matter what happened to you, you survived it. So what's left is the residue, emotional, energetic, and neurological in your system that needs reframing and the release and reconnection and evolution. So by acknowledging and releasing, letting go of that, you release huge amount of energy that you are focusing towards fixing something that doesn't need to be necessarily fixed. It needs to be acknowledged, processed, and let go. And then you create new pathways, new realities based on old experience, but with a different vision and capacity. So that's how
it works. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments? No. I'm not going to start on going more, because yeah, we are too close to the end. We started a few minutes later, but I like to honor the time. Yes, probably just to mention that you know, the involuntary movements and these reflexes are at the very base of and foundation of our development. And then as they mature, you know, the brain and more complex movements take over. And that's why I believe it is important for us to engage with both. So it's important for us to engage with involuntary movements, but equally, it's important to engage with voluntary movements. So, and the reason why I'm saying this, because some of us who were in a very deep sympathetic trauma state for decades, and we only done strong things and strong movements and, you know, developing these kind of aspects. We went into the parasympathetic state, into meditation, yoga, you know, relaxation, TRE. And some of us got stuck in there as well. So my suggestion is not a single intervention can provide a lasting change in human body, because human body is not developed by single input. It's developed by vast myriad of inputs and stimuli, and which are sympathetic, parasympathetic. And if we honor, there is a sympathetic state that needs to be, that we live from, the different hormonal and you know, biochemical secretions are different during the day and during the night, during the sympathetic, during the parasympathetic state. So really respecting these cycles within you and around you will enrich your experience. And you will move from that. Sometimes some of us have been victim of life, of particular situations, and that's true as well. That's fine, but I don't want to stay a victim. You know, I'm bigger than that. You know, we all are bigger than that. So by engaging with life differently, engaging with, you know, different states, different inputs, different cultures, different experiences, that's how your system grows. That's how we all develop. So that to me, it's really important. Not just going on your mat every single day. I mean, if you like your mat and your practice, great, but engage you know, life in different forms, and not also avoiding conflict at any cost. You know, art of conflict is important, obviously, when we feel strong enough and able enough to be, if necessary, in not necessarily conflict, but disagreement, or you know, people have different experiences, different perception of reality. So, and that all of that teaches us something about ourselves and about the world, and we become more inclusive and richer for that. So that's kind of where I'm going with some of my healing work. You know, it's not necessarily just healing, but expanding, you know, now this amazing life that is and can be challenging sometimes. So anyway, that's I think that's me for today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cheda. Thank you for everyone for joining us, and hope to see you again in June. We'll be back looking at contraindications in TRE, and I think that's going to be something that we all need to revise if we are TRE providers as well. So that'll be on Wednesday, the 26th of June. So yeah, see you guys then.
Okay.
Take care.
Everyone, thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much, Cheda and Chandini. Thank you.